Welcome to our podcast, Living Our Best with Memory Loss. What makes this podcast unique is that three of its hosts, Bob, Denis, and SuAnne, have a memory loss diagnosis. The purpose of this podcast is for people to share their experiences with cognitive decline. It is not to provide medical advice. We are not doctors, and we stress that what might have worked for one person might not work for others. If anything you hear on this program inspires you to explore treatment options, we recommend you do so in consultation with your physician.
Welcome back to another episode of Living Our Best with Memory Loss. Today's guest is Katie Norris, and Katie applies the Montessori approach to dementia care. And Katie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you all today, and I absolutely love the podcast and think it's really important. So I'm really excited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's important to start off by saying, because a lot of folks don't know, what is the Montessori approach? What does Montessori mean? I know that typically there are Montessori schools, but would you define it for us?
Sure. So, Montessori, you're right, was started in the early 1900s by Dr. Maria Montessori, the first female Italian doctor. And it started off as a kind of a pedagogy and methodology for education. But, it was really for education for kids. She was given the kids that everyone said no one could work with because they were unteachable. And they were kids that did things like wandered, picked things up off the ground, tried to escape places, elopement. Like, it sounds very much like what we typically say are dementia symptoms, right? And she found that these kids, if you put them in the correct environment that's prepared for their brain, we don't have these problems. And so that's what we apply to people living with dementia. How do we make a prepared environment that works for their brain so that they can function to the best of their ability? There's a whole process and everything that goes with that and the principles and things, but the goal of it is that people can still live with dignity, meaning, purpose, and joy in their life. That's kind of why I love it, because it really maintains people's dignity in life, and takes away this fear and stigma also of dementia as well.
Well, that's so in line with what our podcast is about.
Yeah.
That we can live these rich, meaningful lives. That the day before you get the diagnosis, you're still that same person the day of,
right,
and the days after that diagnosis. And so, how might you encourage an environment to be different than the way that we normally might have approached dementia care? I'm so curious. I want to hear this.
The things that we usually do with people in a dementia care community are things like everybody goes to bingo, everybody goes to sit and listen to someone sing to them. And it's not individualized. And it's really not the way our life is set up. In Montessori care and in Montessori schools, a teacher doesn't stand up and teach. We are guides. And so that means we do things together. And people with dementia have a say and choice in what we do and how we do it. And they help co-create things. And so you'll see lots of activities that are out. Usually they are modified. We have task breakdown for them. So step-by-step process. So people are doing things throughout the day. People are sweeping the floor if they like to do that. They're cleaning up after meals. They help set the table. They decorate the table. They go out and they buy flowers and they do flower arrangement. And then there's also some group activities, but it looks like normal life, as opposed to what we usually see. And what people with dementia had told me that live in care communities, they don't like to be herded like sheep to activity after activity. Or like when we took my mom to an adult day center, I love folding napkins. Folding napkins are a big Montessori thing because it's great for manual dexterity, but it has to have a purpose. I'm not going to fold 50 napkins that we're never going to use, right? So they brought out napkins and had someone fold them, and then dumped the bucket of napkins out right in front of the lady again and had her refold them. And my mom was like, because this is when she had Levi, well, she is dead now, but she had Lewy body dementia, and she's like, absolutely do not ever do that to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so everything has meaning and purpose in Montessori. So that's the way it looks, a little bit different. But then also when you think about behaviors always have a reason. And this idea that people with dementia, they all wander, they all hit, they all do all these things, they all elope, which is trying to get out of the place that they live. They all ask to go home, things like that. There's always a reason for that. And in Montessori care, we find the reason and we meet the need that the person has. So I see questions about where are my parents and I want to go home most often during transition times when there is no cue to the brain of what to do in the environment. So it automatically goes back to something that that person would have worried about, which is also why I teach trauma-informed Montessori care. One person's going to ask about their parents. Another person might ask about where their dog is. Another person might ask about where their kids are. And it's because our brain goes to the things that in its past might have been worried about or, feels like it needs to take care of when it doesn't have a cue and when it's not engaged.
So, Katie, what is the Montessori answer to that?
To wanting to leave,
where's my dog, or
where's my dog?
Yes, when can I go home? So, how would your approach handle that?
My mom used to ask about the dog all the time, so I would put up a sign that says "Snow is safe in the house," and we put it up where Mom and I spend most of the time together, right? So that when she's looking around in her environment to know where the dog is, she already knows where the dog is. She doesn't have to ask me and things like that. However, it depends on the person what thing will work. So for my mom, it was more that when she didn't see the dog, she worried that it wasn't there. Other people see the dog all the time and still worry about the dog. And what I found, then we have to figure out, okay, are they worried? They're not worried where the dog is. They might be worried, is the dog sick or safe or has it been fed? And so we would figure out, okay, if they are somebody where they've had a dog that's been sick a lot, then we do a lot of engagement with the dog so that they're used to seeing them. I talk about, Snow's doing really well. She's so happy. She's eating all her food, and we might play games with the dog or train the dog, things like that, where we're interacting. So repetition works really well for all of us in our brain. And emotional memory lasts longer than factual memory. So the factual memory of the dog is not sick is very different than the emotional memory of the dog is not sick. So the more I build emotional memory with somebody about something that they're worried about and create safety around it, then it decreases the questions about the dog. So that's how we do it in Montessori.
So it really is more individualized.
It's very individualized. Yeah. It's very respectful. Again, it treats people with dignity. I'm a retired nurse, and I remember reading a study that was actually conducted by nurses in nursing homes, and where when they often would talk very childlike to the older people, the staff would, and it just grates on my nerves myself, which Absolutely. Is why I was interested in reading this study. And they found that if they used adult language and that the residents were so much more cooperative, they responded better. They, nobody wants to be talked to like they're a baby,
right?
And it's not respectful. And from this maybe 19-year-old aide that's working in a nursing home, and has good intentions. I mean, I'm not, disrespecting them either. They just don't know, and they come into work, and that's the way people talk to people, so they adopt that. And it was just so eye-opening, I thought, and I wanted like every nursing home to have that study and be required reading, because it's not respectful,
Right.
to...
Let me ask you, how does all that relate to the home? In other words, you're talking about being in a nursing home, being in a group, and all this. Can the Montessori relate back to the home? Which is real important.
Yeah.
So my dad has Alzheimer's and still lives at home, and my mom lived at home all the way throughout her course with Lewy body dementia. And the reason I got started in this because, even though my dad's a doctor and I was a hospital chaplain at the time, when my mom was diagnosed, there were literally no resources. And so it was, well, it's just going to be bad. Here's a pamphlet. Go home. And my mom liked to cook, and then she couldn't follow recipes. And then, the professionals were like, well, she can't cook anymore. Well, she can't, take the dog on a walk anymore. Well, she can't do all these things. And I was like, this can't be possible. Probably because I was a Montessori kid, and Montessori, you know, somewhere in my brain, I knew that the reason I could function with like um, severe ADHD and some other stuff is because I use Montessori for myself. So, I knew that there had to be a different way that we could help mom have everyday life be, good. So, what that looks like at home is it's still the prepared environment. So if mom would like to cook, I modified a lot of the recipes for her. As it got later, I would guide her maybe through each step. But earlier, I could write out a recipe in a different format that she could follow. And we also use templates a lot in Montessori. So like, in recipes, sometimes we put everything in one bowl, and that can be a little confusing. So I would separate things out in a way that made sense for her brain. So she knew exactly where to put things when she was cooking and the process for that. And you only put out the things that you need for the step that you're doing. So if she's making a cake, I'm not going to put out all the ingredients for the cake, for preparing the pan,
Just
and for
one
the
thing
frosting
at a time. I
right
see.
yeah we still want it to be their aesthetic. A lot of times in dementia, we say no clutter, which is technically more helpful, but also some of us actually most people need to see
their stuff.
things,
Mhm.
right?
Uh-huh.
So there's like this fine balance, and you want it to meet the person's aesthetic also. People will often go in and change the environment, and it doesn't look like the person anymore, which nobody likes. But my mom liked to listen to opera, and she liked to knit. And so instead of, the knitting is in the art room or like her craft room, maybe we have a knitting station for her that's been made accessible, right? So it cues her brain. Most of us have it's called an environmental cues in our house. Unless you're a little bit like me with the ADHD brain, like I have a place to put my keys, but not always consistent with it. But that also means that like when that happens, that I need to figure out, okay, there's a pattern of the way that I am using my house when I come in that makes me not use that spot. So it's not that I can't put my keys away ever. It's that how do I work with how my brain works instead? So I need to modify how I put things away for myself, rather than thinking I lose things all the time, right? Because it's an environment. I need something that works with
love
my
that.
brain,
Yeah.
right?
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember how the Montessori teachers would take out just what the child chose for the lesson, and tell a funny story. My 4-year-old came home from Montessori all excited because he got to scrub the toilet. They would have a home thing, and he got to scrub the toilet, and he was so excited. And Mom, you have to have a brush, and you have to have this special stuff. And I said, well, if you're really good, I'll let you do that at home. You know what I mean? But it just, I just love that.
Bob tried that with me. I fell for
that
it the first couple of times.
It didn't work.
It didn't
just-
work.
it just
But
didn't stick,
the
yeah.
way you're adapting
Yeah.
the environment makes so much sense, both in that group setting, but in our homes. I really love that idea. Yeah.
Some other challenges that those of us with dementia face, like aphasia, which depending on the day or depending on the hour of the day, more or less affects whether I'm able to speak or not. And then matters of, you had said resolve. You had used the line resolving challenging behaviors. What about aphasia? How would the unique approach address my diminishment? Like gait changes and proprioception issues and all of that. Everything that you've said about the application of the Montessori approach in public situations makes very good sense, and even as it applies to a home situation, establishing, centers, learning centers, and centers that are only the necessary items for that activity, and they're not complicated by anything other than those items. So taking a look at space design, even in the home of a person with dementia, makes perfect sense. But is there any wisdom that can be applied, or any technique that can be applied to the other still really, really common challenges that people with dementia diagnoses face?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I wrote it down, and I'm going to make sure that I remembered all the things. So you're kind of wondering about the like aphasia, gait changes, proprioception, things like that, right? Okay. So two things. I think, so when I train people in Montessori, okay, my mom had Lewy body dementia, which, is the dementia with Parkinson's like symptoms, and did have a lot of problems with gait. I have a lot of problems with proprioception, and vestibular system issues. So with my mom, with Parkinson's, we used a tandem bike inside the house because her balance wasn't good. But there's lots of good research about pedaling at a certain rate on a bike that helps decrease tremors and gait problems. So we put it on this indoor trainer, and we would help pedal, because she also had a heart condition, to get to the right rate to help decrease her tremors. So with the aphasia, I have to observe exactly how it affects a person. And we might use communication cards and things like that have common information that you might often want to tell me, that you could show me on the card if it's a day that you're really, really struggling. I've had people that there's also some good research that people can often sing what they want to say, but not speak it. And so I
Please don't sing.
have had people.
Please don't sing, Dennis. I've heard you sing. Okay.
So
It's not pretty.
so I kind of have to observe the person and figure out, what support would work for them. So that when you're having a hard time speaking, how do we help you with that? Because it looks a little bit different for every person. The proprioception, knowing where you are in space, there are things that we can do each day to help connect it. Think of it as like a map of your brain, in your brain, of your body. And often it gets a little disconnected. So we do some movement stuff every day to help reconnect that. So that's an activity, kind of, but it's just everyday life, right? And so that your body knows where it is in space a little bit more. And then I would also probably modify an environment a little bit. Maybe somebody needs a chair that is where, if they're having a hard time getting up and down from a chair because they don't know where their body is in space, the chair might need to be set up differently with higher arms. And we might need to go through a process of sitting down and getting up out of a chair like that, so that it has more physical cues of where your body is, if that makes sense. Did that part make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've delved more deeply into all those examples than I've ever thought. So I had no idea that maintaining a cadence, a cycling cadence, would have any effect at all on movement.
And tremors, there's some vision drills that you can do. So like with my dad, he has pretty bad tremors, and I do some vision drills with him, and then his tremors are usually decreased enough so that he can do some more fine motor things. He does like to carve wooden spoons. We've modified that. He doesn't use a knife to carve wooden spoons, but so there are lots of things we can do. I think the hard thing is we see dementia care as somebody has dementia. There's all these things they can't do. Oh, they have a tremor. That's just the way it is. And in Montessori, it's never, that's just the way it is. It's always what's going on neurologically, cognitively, and is there a support for it? And if there is, we will use it.
Katie, your website is called recourscoaching.com. So if folks want to learn more information about the Montessori approach to dementia care, is that where they should go? And then how do I find out if that kind of approach is available in our area or for folks around the country? Where do they look into that?
Sure. So yes, you can go to my website. I am technologically challenged though, so it's not the best. It's not where all my stuff is, I would say. So you can go to the website, the information about like my courses. We have a family care membership where I teach Montessori dementia care to families, and then professional course training and things like that. But we have a lot of videos where my son does skits with me. Montessori is very hands-on, so it's easier if people see things, examples of things. And those are usually on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok under Creative Connections Dementia, which is part of the name of my book. So the website will get you some of the main like businessy side of here's all the stuff that we do. And then there's also links there to go to all the stuff that we have on social media. And of course, there is my book, Creative Connections in Dementia Care. If it's just on Amazon.
Good.
People are going to want to know where to find you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.